presentation, and we reached the part where I explain a little bit about the direct steam generation processes. So you know the steam, it could be saturated, meaning you the temperature of the steam is a temperature of the boiling point, okay? And superheated steam is a temperature of the steam that is above this boiling point, okay? And this boiling point is depending on the pressure of the steam. So here you can have two types of generation, either saturated steam, okay? And here, so the heat transfer fluid is the water, okay, at the beginning. Then it is heated and it boils. And here you have a mixture of steam, gas, and liquid. So you have a separator, okay, and you only what is coming out from the separator on the upper part is only steam, and on the lower part is water, liquid water. Okay, so you can feed directly the turbine, okay, with this steam only, but at the boiling point. Yeah.
Don't you have cavitation problems with the pump that pumps back the
Okay.
liquid to the?
I don't know if we have cavitation problems here, depending on the pressure.
Any pressure drop?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So maybe there will be some exchanges. Yeah. Okay, and here you put the separator, okay, before the end of the parabolic trough line. So here you only heat the steam in the last part of the line. So you superheat the steam. Okay. So these are the two concepts. So many concepts were studied by PSA. So in the Plataforma Solar de Almería, so a Spain research center close to Seville, close to Almería, sorry. And they found that the recirculation concept was the best one, which is with a separator before the end of the line, okay? So the second type I present you just before. And we have seen already this curve, okay? This is the length of the tube, and during a large part, you have the constant temperature of the fluid because it's a boiling temperature. So here you have different regime of flow for the two-phase flow. So either it's a bubbly one, so you have a steam bubble inside the liquid, or you have intermittent flow, which we don't want to happen because here you can see this pocket is separated by a disk of fluid, and this could hit some elbow of the pipes and create some damages to the tubes. And we have two types of a large amount of gas where when the pipe is filled by a low amount of liquid, okay, there are two types of flow, either stratified, so only here we have water only here, liquid water, and for the annular flow, we have water on the walls, everywhere. It is covering walls. And this type is to avoid also, because here when we orient in, we align the mirrors and the receiver with the sun, we have this part of the tube receiver that is lightened by the solar concentrated power, okay, so solar concentrated energy. So we have a transfer of energy from the radiation here to the fluid inside the tube, okay, and because the heat transfer coefficient between the liquid here and the tube is higher than the heat transfer coefficient between the gas, the steam, and the tube here, okay, we will have high thermal temperature differences, okay, high temperature differences inside the tube. So we will have high thermomechanical stresses on the tube, hot part, cold part, different expansion of the tube. So it will it can lead to crack of the tube, okay? So this should be avoided, and we should prefer an annular flow to keep all around on the perimeter of the tube some liquid on it, okay, to increase the heat transfer coefficient and to decrease the temperature differences on the tube. So what we need is to work here in a bubbly regime, okay? So this is the gas velocity, okay, in the tube, and this is liquid velocity, okay? We can separate all the flows, all the regimes into four types with these two velocities. So what we need is to have is to be in the bubbly regime and then go to the annular regime, and to avoid all this part, okay, intermittent and stratified, okay? So this helps to control the flow rate and sun radiation on the receiver. So the advantages of the direct steam generation, it's that we can reach higher temperature of the heat transfer fluid, 550 degrees C at 120 bars. By comparison, the oil is only 390 degrees C. Okay, so we reach higher temperature. There is no need for heat exchanger. There are cost savings. It's less corrosive than molten salt and non-polluting. And we have a low solidification temperature, which is at 0 degree. And the challenges now are mainly the storage. Storage, because you need to store for a long time energy, so you need large storage. And you need storage for different type of heat. Sensible heat to preheat or superheat, okay, the vapor. But also you need good storage for the latent part. So it's difficult to use a sensible material, okay, to store latent heat because of the temperature gradient. So this is a challenge. Also, how to manage to control the flow between the transient. So, for example, the cloud passage on the field. And the instabilities also are difficulties that we need to overcome. And at the moment, it is expected to be cheaper, but for the moment, it has not demonstrated the disadvantage. Okay, and one part that I'm not discussing today, but I think it's a very, this is something that has a great future, is to provide industrial heat, okay, to an industrial process with parabolic trough technology. So here you can provide steam to an industrial process. So either with an oil as heat transfer fluid, you use oil, and after you need an exchanger to produce steam and then feed the industrial process. You can directly generate steam towards the industrial process, or you can use high pressure water inside the field and use here an expansion valve. And so by decreasing the pressure, you create steam, and then you can use it in an industrial process. Okay.
So if it's not cost effective to use this to create electricity instead of fossil fuels, why would it be cost effective to use it to create heat, to create steam for industrial process? Is it more efficient? Is it more direct use, or what's the?
This is a good question. I'm not sure I have the good answer, but my answer will be that we want to separate the, we want to decrease the dependency on the fossil fuels. I think this is the idea behind using solar energy, to decrease the dependency with fossil fuel. Because one day the price could increase, one day we could be, there will be no provider of oil or not oil but fuel, fossil fuels. Okay, I think this is to look into the future. Okay, not make money now. It's to look into the future at 20, 40 years.
Maybe if you don't need so much heat, this can be good. If you don't need the high temperature.
As always, basically, the reason I'm asking right now is because if it's not cost efficient to use this instead of simply directly oil, money basically is just the amount of energy you need to create something. So if you need so much money to create the solar plant, that means you actually use the equivalent energy to create it. So in reality, you're actually losing energy and you're contributing to CO2 if you are using this plant instead, right now, instead of fossil fuels. Because there is a direct correlation between money and fuel. This is the patient.
Okay, we can discuss it later maybe, because I think it's more philosophical discussion.
I'm
And
wondering how we can actually use it here in science, which is it.
Ah.
But maybe we can talk about
Yeah.
how to use it.
yeah, it will be interesting. So, a little bit of history of the power plant development with parabolic trough technology. So this is a picture of the first SEGS solar power plant. SEGS for Solar Energy Generating System in USA. And you have here a table gathering all the plants, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until 9, okay, with the years. So the first one, 85 until 91, so not in 6 years, in fact, okay, and with different technologies and different net output in electrical megawatt, okay, 13 and 30 and 80 for the two last. The temperature at the outlet of the solar field, okay, which depends on the maximum temperature of the heat transfer fluid, so the oil, and the last was 390, okay. The solar field area, the turbine efficiency, so you can see turbine efficiency is about 30–40%, not 40, but a little bit less, okay. And the annual output, and also what they use with the solar field and the oil and the power cycle. They use for the first thermal storage, and after they didn't use it, and they replaced by a gas-fired superheater. So it means that if we go back to the drawing of the power station, the power plant, there was 3 hours thermal storage, the first, and the second they replaced it by a gas-fired separator on the power cycle side, okay? And after that, they use a gas-fired boiler, so to boil the steam, okay, not to superheat the steam, okay. And after they use a gas-fired combustor to heat the heat transfer fluid. So different technologies, different ways of using the fossil fuels to help the operating of the power plant. Okay, so that's different things. And until now, about 83 parabolic trough solar power plants are operating. Okay, okay. Today, this is like a status of the technology. And if we add all the capacity installed, it's about 4 gigawatts of potential electricity to be created. So 4 gigawatts of electricity installed. So it does not mean that it produces 4 gigawatts every day, all the time, but this is installed. So historically is this which is used. So heat transfer, it's oiled. When there is storage, it's storage in molten salt, nitrate salts, and they use a Rankine cycle because it's working at low temperature. And from 85 to 91, only the CEGs were built, so a lot of megawatt. And after it's Spain, and from 91 to 2007, there is a big, huge gap. Nothing were built, and then there is a renew for this technology, and Spain decided to install a lot of 50 megawatts plants, and they built 2 gigawatts. And now, from 2007, the USA also built a lot of power plants, but the PV price has dropped, so a lot of projects went originally planned as CSP went to PV, okay? And these are some examples of big solar power plant with parabolic trough in Spain and in USA. Okay, so the CEGs, you have seen them. And Nevada Solar One also from the loop drawing. Okay, there were also ESCC power plants built around the world, and in Italy, USA, Egypt, Iran, Algeria, and Morocco. And for this amount of electrical energy from the solar field only. So this is a rapid, fast overview of what was the idea of how the parabolic trough technology emerges. So first, it was the increase of oil prices. This was the main reason why in the 70s, when there was the fuel crisis, the oil crisis. And then many USA and Israel started to build some parabolic trough. And so in the late 80s, it's the CEGs plant, okay? And after, in the 90s, only the activity was very slow, and in 2000, the activity has revived a little bit. Okay, so these are all the technology of the solar collectors. So you have the loose, LS3, the Eurotrough, which was like this was from USA, and this was a reply from Europe, okay, to compete in the technology. And after there were many from Enea, from Solargenics, from Sener that were designed and used in actual power plants. Okay, so you will have the slide, so you will be able to review it. If we put all this in a table to see the evolution with the year, okay, of the type of the module, so 95 and until 2009, sorry, 85. You can see that the aperture, so this is the aperture. So this is the parabolic shape of the mirror, and this is the aperture, okay? It was at the beginning about 5 meters, the aperture, so it's quite large. And now it's about, the last one developed, it's 7.5 meter wide. So it's huge. Then the length of a single collector assembly was about 50, then 100 meter, 150, and now it's above 200 meters. So it's also, this length has increased, okay? So the idea is to increase all the geometrical parameters to decrease the number of drives, the number of receiver, the number of structure to install, to decrease the cost, okay? Go larger to make scale economy. Okay. So Eurotrough at the beginning of the 90s, and now at the end of the 2000 years, ultimate trough. You can see the size has increased. And because it's too large, then here they developed some spaces between lines of mirrors to decrease the wind load. Because when the wind is blowing here, it has a huge effect on the support. So to decrease it, you need to insert a gap between the mirrors to decrease the pressure drop, okay? To let the air flow through. Okay. So this is Eurotrough 2. This is one of the largest and installed at Nour number 2 in Morocco. Okay. So now so I'm going to end by the geometry, a little bit of geometry. You will see it will be fast, and you will understand one thing is that the shape of the parabolic trough mirror is important, and the size of the diameter is depending on the shape and the size of the parabola, okay? So it has economical aspects, okay, that are linked to the geometry. So to set the vocabulary okay, L is the length, A is the aperture or the width of the parabolic trough. Phi here, psi is the rim angle. So the angle between here the optical axis and the edge of the parabola, and F the focal. You know all what is the focal. Okay, and here you have the surface of the aperture that is receiving the sun radiation, okay, because the sun radiation is flowing through this virtual surface, okay. But what you pay the amount of matter here, which is curved, okay. But only the effective surface is the aperture surface, okay. The plane one and the curved one is what you pay, okay. And we define the ratio, the aperture surface divided by the surface of the receiver, okay, of the receiver. We define this as a geometric concentration ratio. And to give you an idea of what it should be 26 if the reference for the receiver surface is the envelope of the cylinder, okay? So the envelope of the cylinder is the perimeter times perimeter, pi times diameter times the length, okay? So this is 1, so it will give 26. And if you use as a reference for the receiver area, you use the projected surface of the cylinder, okay? No longer a cylinder, but a plane, okay? Here you have only the diameter, you have not the perimeter, and then you will reach 82 as a value, okay? So this is important because in the flow sheet you can see either 26 or 82. It does not mean that the one is better than the other, but only the reference of the receiver surface is changing. Okay, so this is the x is this axis, y this one. So the relation between x and y for the parabola is given by this relation, and f is the focal point, okay, where you put the receiver. Here, the more it's curved, okay, the less the focal is large, okay. So for the small curvature here, you have a high focal, okay. You see, this is a parabola which is concentrating here, and this one is close to a flat one, okay, is reflecting very high. Okay. So these are the main quantities we can extract from a geometric view of this of the parabola, okay, and we can define here this length, okay, which is the parabolic radius. I'm not going into the details, but it's easy. And you have also this psi angle, which is the Riemann angle, okay, which is the angle between here the optical axis and the edge of the parabola. So if the parabola is finishing here, okay, you have psi, which is a Riemann angle. Okay, but you can define. You have a geometric relation relating the focal, the aperture, okay, the aperture here, and the Riemann angle. Okay, the Riemann angle in that case will be this angle toward here, this point. Okay, so we have a geometric relation relating them. And why I've shown you all of that is to know that if you consider one aperture, okay, this is the same aperture for all the parabola. You have for this parabola, this one, and this one, you have different focal, okay, different focal, but also different Riemann angle, okay. And there is only one focal point here, okay. They are all reflecting toward this point. So there are different Riemann angle, okay, given by this relation. So we have fixed A, and so F and phi and psi are changing. So what is happening here is that here you have the receiver and three parabola shapes. After the first reflection on the mirror, you have a distance between the first reflection and the receiver. If the distance is very large, okay, then you will have a spread of the beam, okay, and this spread will cause a part that will not be intercepted by the receiver. So the spread of the beam will cause the receiver to miss a part of the beam. Is that okay? So we can see that there is a trade-off. If it is too curved here, then this distance will be large, so the beam will spread and one part will be missing the receiver. Now, if the curve is very small, the curvature is very small, then it will be we will have a long reflection, okay, and also we will have a large spread of the beam. So there is a trade-off. For one aperture, you cannot use all any focal length and any Riemann angle, okay. So for this curvature, the spread, the length of this from the reflection here to here will not be very large. The spread will not be large, so will not miss, the beam is not missing the receiver, okay? So if it is, so for one aperture, if we have small or large focal point, okay, focal length, it won't fit the need for the surface to reflect and intercept the receiver. Okay, so maybe like this, it's better to understand because here you have a part of the parabola, and here you have one point of reflection. And here you have the sun. You see the sun. The sun is not a point, okay? It's not one ray. It's here depicted as two rays, so from the top and the bottom of the sun, because it has a dimension. The sun has a dimension, so there is an angle. We see the sun from an angle. So this angle here will be reported, will be, the image of the sun will be done at the focal, okay, with one reflection. And this image will spread depending the distance, yes, between this point and the focal point, okay? So if we are very close, then we will have a lower image, a smaller image. And if we are very far, we will have a larger image. So this means you can design the maximum or the minimum size of the receiver diameter to intercept all the image of the sun, okay? To intercept all the beam. So you can use so here you have a relation, okay? So trust me, it's okay. Delta R here is this distance, okay? So delta R over 2 is this distance, okay? At the focal. And if we use delta R here, and we say that it is the diameter of the receiver, okay? Are you following? Yeah? Then we can apply this relation. And because the epsilon here, epsilon is the sun angle. Epsilon is very small, about 4 times 10 to the minus 3. So 4 milliradian, so it's, or 9 milliradian, so it's small. So we can approximate the tangent of this by only this, okay? This is a good approximation. So now we take one case. We are using a parabola with a rim angle of psi of 90 degrees, okay? So this is psi. Okay, a focal of 2 meters, okay? And this is the sun angle. And we assume an ideal mirror. Okay, so we have the Fresnel and the Snell-Descartes law. Okay, so now we apply it, and we have cos psi, which goes to 0. So here we are going to see this ray, okay? And we are going to compute d, which is this distance, okay? D is this distance, okay? And what we find with that, 3 centimeter, 0.72, okay? So this is the diameter to intercept the sun, okay? The image of the sun for an ideal mirror. But the mirror is not always ideal, so there is small deviation, so this image will spread a little bit more, okay? So this is like a minimal diameter for the receiver tube. Otherwise, some part will be missed by the receiver, okay? Because if it is smaller, then some are going both sides. Okay, so these are the mathematical relations, but after you need to characterize an actual geometry. So you are using some numbers to characterize your new geometry. And you can vary it, you can change psi, f, and the length, the diameters, everything. You can introduce errors, you can play with that, okay? But at the end, you can quantify all the effects by these numbers. So first you have the solar flux incoming here. You have first the losses, which is due to the reflectivity. Then one part will be intercepted by the receiver, and one other part will be lost. So the intercept factor will play a role. Then one part is transmitted by the glass, and what is transmitted, one part is absorbed. Okay, so here you will have an efficiency, optical efficiency, which will be the multiplication of all these factors. Okay, and we call it the efficiency with the incidence angle at 0 degree. Okay. Now we define for different, so for example, you have parabolic trough here, the aperture plane here, okay, and you have the normal of the module here, and the sun is like this, okay, the sun is here, and here you have the theta angle, which is the incidence angle, okay. So this incidence angle, when it is 0, you have the maximum optical efficiency, okay. When theta is greater than 0, you see it? You see the drawing? Or you are, it's hidden? Okay. Better? Yeah. So when this theta angle is higher than 0, then you will have some shadow, you will have some reflectivity that is changing, some transmittivity that is changing, and so on. So we compute them, and we put all of them into an incidence angle modifier. Okay, this is a convention. For Fresnel, they do another thing, but for parabolic trough, it's done like that. So in the incidence angle modifier, you have the losses at the end of the line. Okay, so you have the sun here. So the rays that are reflected just before the end of the mirror are reflected toward the end of the tube, and the rays that are reflected in that part will be concentrated here, but there is no receiver, so they will be lost. So they enter into the incidence angle modifier. Okay. Also, the supports of the receiver here are making some shadow, depending also on the incidence angle. You have shading between lines also. Okay, so if the sun is low in the sky, then you will have shadow from the previous line that is casting on the rear line. So this is, for example, one type of incidence angle modifier. Okay, so at 0 it's 1, but after it decreases. Okay, and we can model it with ray tracing tools. Okay, so this is the drawing I've given you here, and we can plot a Sankey diagram. Okay, so this is the energy that is coming from the sun and going into the fluid. Okay. No. No. This is the sun that is incident on the parabolic trough collector. Okay. So it is the aperture surface. Aperture surface is that one, the plane, the flat one. Okay. Times the DNI. DNI is direct normal irradiation. You know it? Yeah? So this is square meter. DNI is watt per square meter. Okay? And cos theta is the cosine of this angle. So it is 1 when it is perpendicular, and it is not 1 when it goes to 0 for horizontal incidence, because, okay, let's say here, the parabolic trough, if this is incident like here, the sun here is seeing the parabolic trough like that. Okay, so no mirror. If the sun is incident at 90 degrees, then the aperture surface will be seen. Okay? Good. So now you have the maximum energy reaching the parabolic trough collector, and you multiply it by the optical efficiency with theta equals 0, multiply it by the incidence angle modifier for the good theta, with a clearness factor. Clearness factor is a factor that takes into account the clearness, the dust on the mirror. Okay. And you remove the thermal losses from the receiver to the environment, and then you obtain here the energy that is going to the fluid. Okay. Right. So here you have losses, geometrical losses, and thermal losses. Okay. So you can model all of that, and also you can use correlation from experiments made by the manufacturer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the solar tracking. So you can see, you know that in the north hemisphere, okay, we see the sun moving along the years, but for us on the southern hemisphere, okay. So here we have in Spain measurement of DNI, direct normal radiation, depending on the time of the day, okay, and for 2 days in the solstice, winter solstice and summer solstice. So 21st of June and 21st of December. So this is in December. You can see the day, the duration of the day is shorter, okay, and in summer it's larger. So we can produce more energy in summer than in winter, okay? But the maximum DNI is about the same, okay? And there are two orientations for the parabolic trough. The collector assembly could be oriented, aligned north to south or east to west, okay? So for us in Cyprus, what is the best? North to south orientation or east to west?
North to south?
North to south. Okay, so we are going to see that. So these are measurements that were done in PSA in south of Spain, which is about the same latitude as here. And latitude is 37 degrees. I don't know what is latitude here exactly.
33, 34.
Okay. So here you have two orientations. In black, it is north-south aligned, and in blue, it is east-west oriented. And what you can see here is plot is the power obtained by the fluid, recovered by the fluid, okay, depending on the time, and for two orientation of the parabolic trough. So this is a collector, one module, one parabolic trough, okay. And this, let's take the north and south, and I'm saying that this is the south, okay. This is the north, east, and west. So in the morning, okay, the parabolic trough will be oriented toward the east, okay, and then along the day it will follow the path of the sun, okay. So let's talk about the summer. So we are going to see this curve. So in the summer, the sun is very high in the sky, okay? So the incidence angle is very low, okay? The incidence angle is close to 0, okay, along the day. So we have the maximum energy recovered by the fluid. Okay, this is in summer, this is the best time to do experiment, okay? You're convinced? Yeah? Okay, so now let's see for the north-south also, but for in winter. In winter, what is changing? The height of the sun is not close to the zenith, but close to the south pole. Okay, it's okay. It's lower in the sky. Okay, lower in the sky. So in the morning, the sun is here, but instead of being at the zenith, is close to the door. So the sun in the morning, okay, is like that. So it will work well in the morning, and at noon the sun is very low in the sky, and it cannot see very well and the mirror. Okay, so the incidence angle will increase at noon. That's why you have this shape. Okay, at noon it's worse than about 9 in the morning. Okay. Okay, and after it's symmetric. So let's now talk about the east-west orientation. So in summer, the sun is here. So I cannot move like this, okay? So I will be like that. And the sun is not, the incidence angle is between this direction and the direction of the sun. So it's very large. So I have a very bad cosine effect, value of cosine. The cosine is very low. Cosine of theta. Theta is close to 90 degrees, so cosine theta is close to 0. And okay, and now in summer and at noon, it will be fine, very good. And after it's symmetric. So in summer, in the morning, it is not working very well, east-west, due to the cosine effect. And now in winter, what will happen is that I can follow the sun even if it is low in the sky. Okay, so I will perform better close to noon with the east-west orientation. That's why when you are close to the pole, okay, north or south, you can use east and west. But if you are close to equator, the north and south are better. Orientation is better. Okay. I spent some time because I think these are images you need to have when you talk about these technologies. Okay. Okay, and I will conclude very fast with some methods to characterize the waviness of the mirrors. So when you install on the parabolic trough on a solar field, you have facility, okay, to gather all the elements, to manufacture the module on site, okay, and to put it on the field. And once you have put them on site, you want to check if they are well oriented, if there is some deformation due to time or due to the insight, the in-field disposition and installation. Okay. So one of the methods is to use a laser to cover all the surface, the mirror surface. And if you know the direction, the position of the lasers, the source, and the position of the target, you can predict. If you know the surface of the mirror, you can predict the reflected point. Okay. So here you have the source, a laser, that is reaching the mirror, then it will be reflected on the screen here. Okay? And you have the camera here, which is looking back to the screen, and that is looking at the reflection point. Okay? If you know all the geometry, then you can predict exactly the position of the reflected spot of the laser. Okay? If there is a difference between the ideal mirror surface, if there is a waviness of the mirror surface, then the spot will be at the predicted position. So you can infer, you can deduce the waviness. So it's very time consuming to use that, but it can be very accurate, but very time consuming. You can use the deflectometry method also, which uses a camera here, which is looking at the mirror, and through the reflection, the camera is looking at a pattern, a sinusoidal pattern given by a screen, okay? But it's the waviness of the mirror is changing this pattern, okay? So by applying dedicated algorithm, and it's known with deflectometry method, we can infer and we can deduce the waviness of the mirrors. Okay. You have another method which uses the reflection of the receiver tube. Okay. So here you put one camera looking at the reflection of the receiver. Okay. And if you see the receiver at a good position, then you know it's well aligned. If you see the receiver at another position, then you know there is a deviation. And you can extend this technique with drones. And you can see here, so this is the air drone, you know that drone? And here you can see the reflection of the drone here. And here it is filming the reflection of the receiver here, which is black, okay? And you can see the broken lines, okay, effect, which tells us about the orientation of each facet, of each mirror of the module. And you can do that all over the surface and build a deformation map, okay? Yeah.
Once you measure waviness, suppose it is wavy, can you correct, or do you have to replace the whole mirror?
Yeah, you cannot correct the waviness. You can correct the counting. So there are screws behind the mirrors. You can tilt a little bit. Yeah. Otherwise, you need to change the panel, the mirror. And the last slide is about a very efficient but very also time-consuming method, which is called the camera target method. And here you have an operator with a camera that is taking a picture of here a target which is white. And you know the target, there is a hole in it to envelope the tube, okay? And what you can see on the right part is some rays that are concentrated toward the receiver, and some of them are not intercepted. Some rays are not intercepted, like this, okay? Like this. Here, this one is not intercepted, okay? So this is losses, optical losses, clearly. And it is due to the position of the receiver, but also to the counting of each facet of mirrors, okay? And once the operators have corrected the positioning of each facet, you can see here the intercept factor changes from the red curve to the green curve. Okay, so you can increase by 5% the optical efficiency.